Now, before the break, we spoke with Mimi about the Supreme Court and impeachment. In this segment, we're going to talk about her run for DA of Westchester County, where she's taking on the incumbent Anthony Scarpino in the Democratic primary. Mimi is passionate about many issues, including gun control, preventing wrongful convictions, and human trafficking, to name a few. Now, just yesterday, Mimi sent out a tweet about that final issue, human trafficking, modern-day slavery, and it's a much bigger problem in America and Westchester than most people know. And the tweet linked to an article describing the story of a Navajo girl who was abducted and abused in New Mexico. Mimi's also praised sitting Governor Andrew Cuomo in New York for his new proposal aimed at cracking down on internet predators. Cuomo says existing laws are not adequate to keep up with new technology, and he wants sex offenders to divulge their screen names to prevent them from using those apps to target children. Now, the scope of the problem, it's beyond comprehension. Now, last year, tech companies reported 45 million online photos and videos of child sexual abuse. Now, give you a frame of reference, just a decade ago, that number, less than 1 million. And the details are frankly too horrific here for us to talk about. And Mimi, I've been following the series the Times has been doing, and I've interviewed some of the principals, and it's worse than I could ever explain. The technological wherewithal of some of these monsters really is outpacing what in many cases underfunded law enforcement can keep up with. Talk about what the governor did, and also what you could do as a prosecutor to, if not even level the playing field here, both bring awareness but also the tools necessary to combat, just about the worst crimes that I can think of to children.
Right. So first of all, I just want to say it's a point you said, like that it's too disturbing, some of the details to talk about here. And that's part of the problem, right? It's so hard to get people to talk about this. I mean, the same thing with rape or child abuse in general. It's hard. People don't want to think about it because it is so utterly disturbing, and most people can't comprehend that there are people out there that would do these kinds of things to anyone, let alone children. So the fact that the New York Times is doing front page series on it, the fact that we're talking about it, the fact that Governor Cuomo is passing, proposing legislation, this is already a big step forward from where we were, and that's important. I think part of the issue and why those numbers have jumped so dramatically, it's the internet. I mean, we talked about this before, and I feel a little bit like a broken record, but I'm going to keep saying it. When we're talking about sex trafficking of children, we are also talking about online exploitation of minors. Until we recognize that connection and bring our strategies, both of law enforcement, education, and awareness, to tackle those two things simultaneously, we're not going to address it, right? If we treat them as two separate problems, we're not going to be able to eradicate it.
So I'm going to talk to you about, it's the same kind of subject when we get with guns in a minute, but on the subject of this, is it reasonable to hold tech companies accountable? They're not generating the content, but they've allowed a platform to be used to traffic in, obviously, this horrific content here, and in an additional perversity, creating a feeding frenzy for people to participate. They have to procure and create more original video, creating more victims in the process, etc. How culpable should they be, and can they be held responsible?
So to hold them responsible on a criminal level is very hard.
Civil level.
Right. On a civil level is different. And remember, Backpage, which was the center, the main hub for so much of this, not necessarily the sort of child pornography videos, but more the prostitution, else, right, which led to the in-person meetings and sex trafficking. That was shut down, and it was shut down because finally there was really, from a lot of the victims themselves, started this groundswell and outcry, and it took hold in Congress, and there were hearings, and Backpage was shut down. Something else is coming into the void, of course, and that will always happen, but that doesn't mean that it's a futile exercise. So I think absolutely part of this battle, and this is where state attorney generals as well as Congress need to really be active in holding accountable tech companies who are not doing anything, let alone enough, to have standards and enforce those standards on their sites.
As you said, it's important to make people aware, but also to scare them a little bit. People probably think, oh, Westchester County, a largely affluent county outside of New York City, roughly 1 million people. they're by no means exempt from this, right? You've dug into this problem. I mean, it is far more rampant than people think. Parents need to be far more invested into their kids' online worlds, et cetera. But there's no pocket of this country that says, oh, that's that place's problem. It's not ours.
Exactly. I mean, in some ways, the internet is, sort of the great equalizer. I mean, part of it is getting people to realize, getting children to realize, getting parents to realize that people who you may not necessarily expect it from, they are capable of this, and it's because they are master manipulators that they are so successful at it.
That pivots to guns for a moment. We've been following the Sandy Hook case, where there has been traction, at least. We'll see where this all ends up at the end of the day, but that a gun manufacturer is not necessarily exempt from maybe civil penalties in terms of where they give it to, in terms of the distributors, and how the pipeline then flows and who gets their hands on these guns. Do you believe, because there's this carve-out the gun industry has and no one else is, me personally, I think that is the way, in the pocketbook, that will change what products get manufactured, the oversight in terms of where that product finally ends up into. It's not enough to say, okay, it leaves my factory, not my problem anymore. Am I naive? Is there a chance maybe that we could finally connect the circle here, and that people are going to have to think twice once it leaves the factory?
I hope so. I mean, that does seem like sort of one of the key strategies that hasn't yet actually happened that could really make, not alone, but could make a huge difference. I mean, the same way that a cigarette tax, has had an impact on that industry. Until now, until recently, I think the NRA was so powerful that no one was going to be really allowed to effectively go after the gun lobby. But the NRA is really seemingly falling apart at the seams, in large part due to the actions of groups like Moms Demand Action, which, as you know, I've worked with a lot and I think is hugely effective.
Last thing before I let you go, New York State, major change with cash for bail. Impact a lot more people than people realize at home. Is it going to be good for justice or not?
Overall, yes, I would say it is absolutely good for justice, because the idea that people were being detained pre-trial just because they couldn't afford the bail, that's a blight on all of us, on our system. That should not happen. Are there people that need to be detained because they are dangerous or they absolutely will become fugitives? Yes, and we need to make sure that the laws are written in a way and enforced in a way and followed in a way that protects that and protects the community. But overall, this is something that New York was way lagging behind in. The system that I came from in the federal government, people were not detained simply because they couldn't put up bail money. That is not the way we want our justice system to work, and it's time that New York caught up, and it is. We're going to have to hammer out the details, but I think it's overall a very good thing.
Mimi Rocah, again, candidate here for District Attorney in Westchester County. Best of luck as always, Mimi. All right, when we come back, everybody, could President Trump become actually emboldened? And could things get even more crazy once impeachment is done and he keeps his job, which is looking likely after the Senate? If the past is any prologue, you are not going to like the answer to that question.